I'm in a garden in Oswestry, Shropshire. It's a garden which I designed 3 years ago for the national charity Horatio's Garden. Whenever I design a garden, my key thought is how will the garden be used? And here that's absolutely critical because it's a garden designed specifically for hospital patients with spinal injuries. My brief from Horatio's was to design a garden that not only looked beautiful but would also pull patients off the wards and into the garden all the year round. Obviously, the garden had to be accessible to patients using wheelchairs for the first time and for hospital beds, without looking sterile as those spaces around hospitals often do. When I first visited the site, it was depressing. The garden really consisted of a grass verge from the building 10 metres wide to quite a busy road. So there was no containment to the site at all. Your view just leaked straight out to the road. And there was a long rat run between two single-storey buildings. There were a few raised beds which were falling to bits and some very institutional type planting, but there was nowhere you would really want to sit and enjoy a space. And so people really spent their time indoors. We brought in an instant yew hedge and that just totally created privacy straight away. Doesn't block out the noise, but I think when you can't see the source of the sound, it does hide or reduce the noise levels psychologically. I then set about dividing the space up into 4 or 5 key areas. So this area is one space, but actually it's got sort of 3 semi-divisions. So this prime function space is quite a large area where you can have fairly large gatherings. They have so many different events here. But then off this, we've got the little offsets. And these are little areas which are quite private. Because when you have a visitor coming to see you, you want to talk about quite intimate things. So I've made these 4 or 5 little spaces all around the garden where you can come and have private conversations. And I just think that's so important. In a way, it was a bit like doing a Chelsea show garden and that you wanted it to be great from day one. You couldn't afford to put in tiny wee trees, tiny plants and things like that because you want the impact straight away. You want it to work straight away. And so that inevitably adds to the cost. We used quite a few of these big osmanthus trees in these metal drums, which we've actually put the Horatio's Garden logo on. And I think that's important because not only do those trees function at eye level, they really help to screen and mask the hospital buildings, but they also give a sense of green instantly from day one. And I think if you expected the patients who are here to see the garden as an embryo garden that was waiting to develop 5-10 years down the line, I don't think that would have been so good. And I think it was necessary to make it work really well from the initial outset. So the paving here, we experimented with a bit. You cannot have falls greater than 1 in 100 because of the hospital beds and the wheelchair access. You cannot have any lips or anything like that. It has to be totally flat. And this resin bonded gravel, it doesn't look as though the water will drain through it, but it does. But I didn't want to make it all resin bonded because I think that looks a little bit institutionalized. And so we wanted to put in paving slabs. Now I love the shape of a serpentine because it's very traditional, but to me it feels quite funky and modern as well. And then we've got the rill. And I think water is just so critical in any garden. It pulls in the wildlife, it's mesmerizing, it's a draw to people. You just cannot help but watch it. It makes you feel very tranquil. I think it's a nice place you can just sit with a friend and chat and linger. And then you've got the space behind the rill where we've also picked up the serpentine's curve, and I've made this sort of walkway through the sort of semi-woodland area, and that's to create a bit of buffer from the main function space to the road. So we've done it with lovely multi-stemmed river birches, which I think are fabulous. underneath we've got sort of woodland type roses, beautiful astrantia, which are fabulous here. And we've slightly raised these beds either side of the serpentine just to get a bit more of a feeling of level difference in, because obviously on a very flat site, it's pancake flat, we want to generate a bit of an unevenness of level visually to give a bit more interest really. So even this space is well divided up into sort of 3 subsections. This is what I thought of as the rat run. It's a long corridor in between 2 single-storey buildings, and it was dominated by the architecture and the strong fascia boards. So what I did is I broke it up with the U buttresses that come out from the building, emphasising that there are different parts of the space. So we've got the wider spaces in front of the French windows and then the narrow bits. And then I've also taken these metal arches over the top to further break up the space, and then the pleach trees and the osmanthus, taking the theme that we've used all the way through the garden. So it doesn't seem so linear, and it's a space that you might actually want to come out and relax in. Now, the planting I've made very soft and ebullient, but it needs to look good in the winter. So apart from the lavender and the roses, which just give a lot of the summertime, then we've also got yew balls, euphorbias, and other things to give some form in the winter. And then we've got the staff room. Now, previously, the staff had no direct access in the garden. They had a tiny little staff room. We put in the French windows and their own paved area where they can come out, eat and relax in between their stressful work. And I just think it improves the quality of everybody's life if you've got a space where you can have a bit of downtime. Then the final part of the corridor, we've done something totally different, and that is another space entirely. Behind me is the wonderful magnolia. Now this was here when we started, and it's the big asset of the garden. It's rumoured to have been planted by Agnes Hunt. Agnes Hunt is one of the people that the hospital was named after, and she was quite a girl. She's born around the 1860s, and she's thought to be the first orthopaedic nurse. And she had her patients in actual shelters with open sides, so they'd be sitting or lying in their beds in the fresh air. And even when it was snow, she had covers over them or was knocking the snow off their beds, because she really believed in the outdoor world, the fresh air, the communing with nature was so important on the whole process of getting better. So I really feel her presence here. It's almost spooky, I think. But the rest of this corridor from here on is quite different, and that's because we've made it into a children's play area partly, and that is because children come to visit their parents perhaps, and some of them are very young and they're here for quite long periods, having travelled a huge distance, and so it's lovely for them to be able to get out and let off steam. So we've got 3 simple bits of play equipment here, having bark with the safety surface underneath, and then we've kept it all quite natural, so children can run over the comfrey, they can play amongst the bamboo and the buddleias, and it won't really damage the plants. The other important thing about this area is the practice area for wheelchairs at the end. Now, when we designed this garden, we showed the drawings to patients and consultants and the nurses, and we asked their opinion. What did they think was essential? And they flagged this up, a practice area with drop curbs, different slopes and surfaces for people on wheelchairs to try out. And so we've done exactly that here. Previously, they had to travel a long way to use facilities like these. So to have them on their doorstep really makes so much sense. So when they leave here, they're confident with different surfaces and different slopes. The path beyond here is actually quite a slope down and up, 2 different gradients, again, to practice using this. So the whole experience of designing a garden like this is so critical to get right, so many different features and elements, and hopefully it does push the boundaries a bit and work for all those who use it. The greenhouse is one of the most important buildings in the place. It's wonderful for patients to use it in wet weather or sunny weather. They can pot on plants, sow plants. Hopefully they can really catch the gardening bug if they haven't got it already. We've done a double line of raised beds leading to it. And these work so well, obviously, with the greenhouse. And we've got ornamentals, we've got edibles, we've got beds of different sizes and different heights. So whatever your disability, they're hopefully really useful to use. Also here, we've got this very public part of the garden, and then we've got the wards just here. And so I wanted to create a bit of separation so that when you're lying in your bed, you don't feel everybody's looking at you. So I put a line of osmanthus in pots to give them some privacy. And then I've also divided it in the paving with the serpentine. The other building here we've got is the very important garden room. And obviously it's not always fine and dry. And so we've got a lovely covered building there where you can get away from the smell of hospitals. It's a completely different environment. It's got a fireplace in it. I felt it was really important because I think they're just such a convivial thing. They have events there, there's a small kitchen. And then the final touch for the garden room was the ceiling. And we had a plywood ceiling. And because a lot of people are on beds, we did a mural, and we thought hot air balloons in the sky would be really nice. So when you're lying on your back, you can just look up at something other than lights and a ceiling. Working on this Horatio's garden has definitely been one of the most challenging, yet rewarding and definitely enjoyable gardens I've ever worked on. What is lovely is that we come back twice a year just to see how it's developing, to help with advice on maintenance of trees and paving, any problems they've got. And so you meet different patients and you meet the staff every time, and you just glean from experiences that they've had and how it's all developing. And it's lovely to think that perhaps when we come back, if we're lucky enough in 20 years' time, that the garden really will have bedded in and developed over those years. It really has been a fabulous experience working on this.